Stripped by her tribe, the Apache girl found redemption in a lonely farmer. The sun rose slowly over the vast desert, painting the sky with shades of gold and red. The air was warm, but the wind carried a sharp dryness that made every step feel heavier. The Apache girl, young but strong, stood at the edge of her village, staring at the dust beneath her feet. She had once walked these paths with pride, knowing that her people respected her. But today, everything had changed. The elders had judged her harshly, and the whispers of her tribe followed her like shadows wherever she went. She had always been careful, thoughtful, and mindful of her actions. She listened to her mother's stories, which taught her about honor, courage, and the responsibilities of being part of a proud community. Her father had shown her how to track animals, read the signs of the land, and move silently through the forest without disturbing anything. She was proud of her skills, proud of her heritage, and proud to be a part of a tribe that had survived for generations against countless hardships. Yet all of that pride had come crashing down in a single, devastating moment. It had begun with a small mistake, one she hadn't thought would matter so much. A misunderstanding with one of the elders had escalated quickly. Rumors spread through the village like wildfire, twisting her intentions into something dishonorable. When she tried to explain herself, the elders had turned their backs, shaking their heads with solemn disappointment. Then came the ceremony, a public shaming meant to teach a lesson not just to her, but to anyone who might question the rules of the tribe. They stripped her of her privileges, a symbolic act meant to strip her of her identity and her dignity. As she stood among the crowd, bare and exposed in more ways than one, she felt a strange mixture of fear, anger, and sorrow. The villagers' eyes were hard, judging, and cold. Some avoided looking at her altogether, pretending she did not exist. Others stared too long, as if searching for the fault they believed she carried. Her heart ached with humiliation, but more than that, it ached with loneliness. The girl realized, painfully, that she was now completely alone, not just physically but in spirit. Those she had once considered friends and family now seemed like strangers. Their love and loyalty evaporated as easily as morning mist. After the ceremony ended, she walked away from the village, the weight of her shame pressing down on her shoulders. Each step through the desert was heavy, but she walked on, driven by some stubborn flicker of hope inside her. She did not yet know where she was going, only that she had to leave the place that had once felt like home. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a vast canvas of sand, rocks, and distant mountains. The heat of the day beat down on her, and the chill of the night crept into her bones as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon. She found a small, rocky cave to rest in, curled up on the cold ground, and let her tears flow freely. The nights were the hardest. Alone, with only the stars above her and the cold wind as her companion, she felt the weight of her isolation more than ever. Memories of her childhood haunted her, the laughter of her friends, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the guidance of her father's hands. Those memories now seemed like a different life, a life she might never return to. Yet amid the sadness, there was a tiny spark of determination. She told herself quietly that she could survive this. That even if her tribe had cast her out, she was strong enough to find her own path. Days turned into weeks as she wandered farther from the village. She learned to move carefully across the desert, to find water in hidden streams and shade under scattered trees. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her about the land, the signs of approaching storms, how to track animals, and how to stay safe when alone. Slowly, the girl began to realize that her survival depended not just on her skills, but on her mindset. She needed to overcome the fear and humiliation that had weighed so heavily on her spirit. Each day she walked, each night she rested, she felt herself growing stronger, more aware of the world around her, and more capable of facing it. But even as she grew stronger, she could not escape the feelings of betrayal and sadness. She wondered why the elders had been so harsh, why her friends had turned away, and why the community that she had loved so dearly could reject her so completely. These questions often kept her awake at night, staring at the stars and listening to the wind whispering across the desert. Sometimes she wanted to scream, to let all her anger and sorrow out into the empty sky. Other times she simply sat in silence, letting the emptiness surround her, letting it remind her that she had no one to rely on but herself. Despite the pain, she also began to notice small signs of hope in the desert. Birds that sang even in the harsh sun, flowers that bloomed in unlikely places, and animals that moved silently and gracefully through the sand. These small wonders reminded her that life could still be beautiful, even in hardship. She realized that perhaps her journey into the wilderness was not just a punishment, but an opportunity, a chance to discover her own strength, her own resilience, and her own path. She began to understand that redemption would not come from her tribe or anyone else, but from within herself. One morning, as the sun rose and the desert seemed to glow with warmth, the girl spotted smoke rising in the distance. Curious and cautious, she moved closer, keeping to the shadows and observing quietly. She saw a small farm, modest and lonely, with a few animals grazing in the yard and a house tucked between low hills. It was unlike anything she had known before, a place of quiet, calm, and work. The girl felt a strange pull toward it, a mixture of curiosity and longing. Perhaps this place and the person who lived there could offer something she had not felt in a long time: safety, stability, and maybe even understanding. As she approached, she saw a figure moving slowly outside the house. A man, older than her but not elderly, was tending to his crops. His movements were careful and deliberate, each action reflecting patience and experience. The girl hesitated, unsure if he would welcome her, suspicious of whether anyone could truly be kind in a world that had so recently rejected her. But desperation pushed her forward. She called out softly, her voice trembling, and the man looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of surprise and curiosity. That moment, brief as it was, felt like a turning point. The girl realized that while she could not change the past or undo the pain inflicted by her tribe, she could take steps toward a new life. She could learn, grow, and perhaps find redemption not in the eyes of those who had shunned her, but in her own strength and the kindness of those willing to see her as a human being, rather than a symbol of shame. The first meeting with the farmer was cautious. She kept her distance, wary of rejection, but he did not turn her away. Instead, he offered her food, water, and a place to rest. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe she could survive, maybe she could heal, and maybe she could find a new path forward. And though the road ahead would be long and full of challenges, she knew that the desert, harsh as it was, had prepared her for this journey. She had endured the worst of humiliation, loneliness, and fear, and now, perhaps, the first steps toward redemption could begin. In that quiet moment, standing at the edge of the farmer's small homestead, the Apache girl realized something important. She was not defined by the judgment of others, nor by the mistakes she had made. She was defined by her courage, her resilience, and her willingness to continue moving forward despite pain and fear. The desert had stripped her of everything she thought mattered, but it had also revealed something deeper within her, a strength she had never fully known, and a spark of hope that, with care and guidance, could grow into a new life. The Apache girl woke early the next morning to the sound of birds chirping and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The farmer's small house stood quietly before her, bathed in the soft golden light of dawn. She had spent the night in a small corner of his barn, grateful for the straw mattress and the warmth it offered against the cool desert air. Though she was still cautious, a small sense of relief had settled over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt that she was not entirely alone in the world. The farmer, a man in his 40s with weathered hands and a gentle demeanor, greeted her with a nod as he brought out a simple breakfast of bread and water. He did not ask questions about who she was or where she had come from. He simply offered food and warmth, and that was enough for the girl. She took a piece of bread in her hands, chewing slowly as she watched him move around the yard, tending to the animals and the small garden. There was a quiet rhythm to his work, a calm steadiness that she found comforting after the chaos of her life in the tribe. Days passed, and the Apache girl learned to live alongside the farmer, observing his routines and helping in small ways. She swept the floor, collected water from the nearby stream, and fed the chickens and goats. Each task was simple, yet it carried a sense of purpose. She began to realize that even the smallest actions could give her a feeling of accomplishment, a sense that she mattered in a world that had so recently abandoned her. The farmer never pressured her, never demanded explanations for her past, and never judged her. He simply showed her that life could continue, that there was kindness in the world, and that she could trust someone again. Slowly, she began to speak more freely, telling him stories of the desert, the animals she had tracked, and the skills her father had taught her. He listened carefully, nodding and asking questions, treating her words with respect and interest. For the first time, she felt that her knowledge and experiences were valued, and this gave her a growing sense of self-worth. As she worked alongside the farmer, she also began to explore the land around the farm. The desert, though harsh, held hidden beauty she had never noticed before. She discovered small clusters of wildflowers growing near the rocks, birds building nests in unlikely places, and animals moving silently through the underbrush. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her about reading signs in the land, and she applied them now with a careful eye. She began to track rabbits, notice water sources, and recognize the subtle changes in the weather. The desert was no longer just a place of loneliness and fear. It was becoming a teacher, offering her lessons in survival, patience, and resilience. The Apache girl's mind often wandered back to her tribe, and she could not deny the sadness and anger that sometimes surfaced. She wondered why the elders had treated her so harshly, why her friends had turned away, and why the people she had loved could reject her so completely. These thoughts could have consumed her, yet she found that the farmer's quiet presence and the rhythm of farm life helped her manage the pain. Instead of focusing on betrayal, she focused on learning, growing, and finding her place in this new environment. One afternoon, while gathering firewood near a cluster of trees, she came across a small stream she had not noticed before. The water was clear and cool, reflecting the blue sky above. She knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink, and felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. The simple act of drinking from the stream reminded her that life could continue, even after loss and hardship. She realized that she was beginning to heal, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through quiet, steady moments of care for herself and the world around her. The farmer noticed the changes in her as well. He saw her becoming more confident in her movements, more comfortable in her surroundings, and more willing to take initiative. He encouraged her gently, showing her how to plant seeds, mend fences, and care for the animals. He never praised her in an exaggerated way. Instead, he acknowledged her efforts calmly, making her feel capable without arrogance. The Apache girl began to feel a sense of pride in her work, a pride that had been taken from her by her tribe's judgment. She realized that she could define her own value, independent of others' opinions. Despite the progress she was making, there were still moments of doubt and fear. At night, when the desert was quiet and the stars filled the sky, she sometimes felt the old loneliness creep back in. She missed her family, her friends, and the familiarity of her tribe. But instead of succumbing to despair, she used these moments to reflect on her journey. She reminded herself that she had survived the desert, that she had found food, water, and shelter, and that she had learned new skills. Each challenge she faced reinforced her strength and determination, teaching her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The farmer also began to share parts of his own life with her. He told her about his childhood, the struggles he had faced on the land, and the lessons he had learned from hard work and patience. She listened attentively, realizing that life was full of both hardship and resilience. She learned that kindness, like strength, could be cultivated, and that even a solitary person could offer guidance and support to someone in need. The more she listened, the more she understood that redemption was not just about being forgiven by others. It was about forgiving oneself and choosing to move forward with courage and hope. Over time, the Apache girl and the farmer developed a quiet bond. It was not a bond of words or declarations, but of trust, respect, and shared experiences. She learned to anticipate his needs, to care for the animals without being asked, and to work alongside him with patience and diligence. In turn, he noticed her efforts, acknowledged her presence, and included her in the rhythms of daily life. Together, they created a small world of stability and purpose, where each day brought new lessons and small victories. One day, as the girl worked in the garden, she realized that she was no longer afraid of being alone. The desert, once a place of punishment and isolation, had become a place of learning and growth. She had survived hunger, thirst, and fear, and had discovered the strength within herself to continue moving forward. She had learned that life could be harsh, but it could also be beautiful, full of small wonders that reminded her of hope, resilience, and the possibility of new beginnings. The Apache girl also began to notice changes within herself. She was more patient, more careful, and more thoughtful in her actions. She approached challenges with a calm determination, understanding that every difficulty was an opportunity to grow. She began to dream not of returning to her tribe, but of building a life of her own choosing, a life where she could be respected, valued, and safe. The farmer's guidance had helped her see that redemption was not something given by others. It was something earned through courage, work, and self-belief. As the weeks turned into months, the Apache girl became an integral part of the farm. She tended the crops, cared for the animals, and helped maintain the home. She had learned to read the signs of the land, track the movements of animals, and anticipate changes in the weather. She had also learned to trust, to hope, and to find strength in moments of quiet reflection. The desert, once a symbol of punishment and shame, had become a teacher, guiding her toward resilience, understanding, and the possibility of a new life. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, the Apache girl sat outside the farmhouse, looking at the horizon. She thought of her tribe, her past, and the challenges she had faced, but she did not feel anger or bitterness. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and hope. She had survived the worst of her despair, learned the skills to live independently, and found someone who believed in her without judgment. She realized that her journey was far from over, but that she had taken the first steps toward healing, self-discovery, and redemption. In that moment, she understood something profound. Life could continue even after betrayal, loss, and humiliation. She had been stripped of her identity by her tribe, left to wander alone, and forced to confront her deepest fears. Yet in the process, she had discovered her inner strength, the beauty of the desert, and the quiet kindness of the farmer who had offered her a chance to begin again. She knew that the path ahead would have challenges, but she also knew that she was no longer the same girl who had been cast out. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever life might bring. The days on the farm passed with a quiet rhythm, and the Apache girl began to feel a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. She worked alongside the farmer, learning new skills that strengthened her body and mind. He showed her how to repair fences, plant crops in precise rows, and care for animals in ways that kept them healthy and content. Each lesson was accompanied by patience, gentle guidance, and quiet encouragement. Unlike her tribe, where judgment came swiftly and harshly, the farmer offered her room to learn and grow without fear of reprimand. As the girl's skills improved, so did her confidence. She discovered that she could manage tasks independently, from feeding the animals in the early morning to collecting water from the stream in the afternoon. The desert had taught her endurance, but the farm taught her precision and patience. She realized that she could handle responsibilities, that she was capable of making decisions that mattered, and that her actions had meaning beyond mere survival. For the first time in her life, she felt competent and needed, not as a servant or an outsider, but as someone who contributed to a shared life. The farmer, too, began to see a remarkable change in her. Her presence was no longer hesitant or timid. She moved with quiet confidence, her hands steady, her gaze thoughtful. He noticed the way she observed the land, noting changes in the weather or the behavior of animals before they became problems. He admired her intuition and her willingness to learn, though he never praised her excessively. Instead, he acknowledged her efforts with small nods, shared glances, and occasional words of encouragement, teaching her that recognition did not always have to be loud to be meaningful. With her confidence growing, the Apache girl began to share more of herself with the farmer. She spoke of her childhood in the tribe, the skills her parents had taught her, and the dreams she once held before shame and exile had entered her life. She told him about the desert, the animals she had tracked, and the places she had explored alone. In return, the farmer shared stories of his own past, his struggles to maintain the farm through droughts and storms, the lessons he had learned from years of solitude, and the small joys he had found in tending the land. Through these exchanges, a bond of trust and mutual respect began to form, unspoken yet unmistakable. The Apache girl began to realize that trust was a fragile thing, and that it had to be nurtured carefully. In the tribe, she had trusted others too quickly, and that trust had been broken in the harshest way. But with the farmer, she learned patience. She learned to observe, to test kindness with small steps, and to allow connection to grow naturally. She discovered that not everyone judged harshly or betrayed, and that some people could offer guidance, support, and understanding without expectation. The farmer's calm, consistent presence showed her that trust could exist even after pain, if approached with care. Life on the farm also taught the Apache girl about responsibility in a deeper sense. She realized that caring for living things, plants, animals, even the land itself, required attention, dedication, and foresight. A neglected animal could fall ill, a poorly tended crop could fail, and the land could lose its vitality if not respected. These lessons mirrored the emotional care she was learning to give herself. Just as the farm needed attention, so did her spirit. She had to nurture her own healing, tend to her own fears and doubts, and cultivate patience and resilience within herself. One particularly hot afternoon, as she worked in the fields, she noticed a young foal struggling to keep up with its mother. Its legs were weak and it wobbled with every step. The girl's heart went out to it. Carefully, she guided the foal closer to the barn, offering it water and helping it find shade. The farmer came to her side, observing quietly. She felt a surge of pride and purpose, realizing that she could protect and care for vulnerable creatures. It was a small act, but it made her feel capable, needed, and alive in ways she had never felt since leaving her tribe. As the seasons changed, the girl's connection to the land deepened. She learned to predict weather patterns, to understand the signs of approaching storms, and to plan for planting and harvest with precision. She began to feel a sense of mastery, not over the land itself, but over her own ability to survive and thrive within it. Each day brought new challenges: an injured animal, a damaged fence, a crop failing in the sun. But each challenge also offered an opportunity to grow, to apply what she had learned, and to strengthen her skills and spirit. The relationship between the girl and the farmer grew as well. They did not speak of feelings in grand or dramatic ways, but the depth of their bond became apparent through shared routines, quiet understanding, and small acts of care. The farmer would notice when she seemed tired or burdened, offering help without words. The girl, in turn, would anticipate his needs, making his work easier and supporting him in subtle, thoughtful ways. Trust and companionship blossomed naturally, grounded in mutual respect rather than words or declarations. One evening, after a long day of tending the crops, the girl sat outside the farmhouse and watched the sun sink behind the distant hills. The sky was ablaze with colors, and the air held a soft, cool relief from the day's heat. She thought about her journey, from the humiliation and exile she had faced in her tribe, to the lonely nights in the desert, to the careful, patient days on the farm. Each step had been difficult, yet each step had brought her closer to a life she could shape herself. She realized that her past did not define her. It was the choices she made now, each day, that would shape the person she was becoming. The farmer noticed her quiet reflection and approached without interrupting. He handed her a simple cup of water, and they sat together for a while, watching the sky change colors. Words were unnecessary. The presence of another human being who understood, who cared, and who offered quiet companionship was enough. In that moment, the girl understood the value of connection built on respect, patience, and trust. She realized that relationships could heal, that bonds could form even in unexpected places, and that redemption could be found not only in self-forgiveness, but in the kindness of others. As weeks turned into months, the Apache girl continued to grow stronger, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She learned to rise early with the sun, to manage her responsibilities without constant guidance, and to approach each day with focus and care. She had transformed from a frightened, ostracized girl into a capable, thoughtful young woman, confident in her abilities and increasingly comfortable in her own skin. She had discovered that independence did not mean isolation, and that connection did not require perfection. The farm became a sanctuary for her, a place where she could continue to heal and learn. She began to find joy in small things, the sound of the wind through the trees, the laughter of animals, the satisfaction of a day's work completed. She also began to see that her life had meaning beyond survival. She could contribute, nurture, and care, and in doing so, she could create value for herself and for those around her. The sense of shame that had once weighed heavily on her heart began to lift, replaced by quiet confidence and growing self-respect. Yet, she also understood that her journey was not over. She had learned survival skills and patience, but she knew that true healing required more than physical competence. It required emotional openness, trust, and the willingness to embrace life fully, even after suffering. The farmer, without ever pushing her, helped her learn these lessons simply through his steady presence, his patience, and the way he lived his life. He demonstrated that compassion could be consistent, quiet, and reliable, and that true guidance often came without force or judgment. One afternoon, as the girl worked in the garden, she felt a sense of peace she had not known since leaving her tribe. She realized that while her past could not be changed, her future was hers to shape. She had learned to trust, to work, and to care for others. She had found stability, safety, and guidance in the most unexpected of places. The farmer had become more than a mentor or companion. He had become a symbol of the possibility of a life rebuilt, a life of dignity, purpose, and quiet happiness. The Apache girl had discovered that redemption was not a single moment or grand gesture. It was the accumulation of small, steady steps, learning a skill, caring for a living being, trusting another person, and believing in herself. Each day on the farm offered her new opportunities to practice resilience, patience, and courage. With each passing season, she became more capable, more confident, and more ready to embrace whatever the future might bring. By the end of this period, the Apache girl had transformed in ways she could scarcely have imagined when she had first wandered into the desert alone. The shame and fear imposed by her tribe had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to define herself through action, effort, and character, rather than through the judgment of others. She had discovered the strength to rebuild her life, the courage to trust again, and the wisdom to value the quiet, steady guidance of someone who cared. In the stillness of the evening, as the sun disappeared behind the hills and the stars began to sparkle in the sky, she realized that she was no longer just surviving, she was living. Each day brought challenges, yes, but also joy, learning, and growth. She had found a place where she could belong, a person who believed in her, and a life that offered purpose and hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future full of promise and peace. The seasons on the farm began to change slowly, each bringing new challenges and opportunities. Spring arrived with gentle rains, encouraging the seeds the Apache girl had planted to grow into tender shoots. She watched with satisfaction as green leaves pushed through the soil, a visible sign of the care and attention she had given. The farmer worked alongside her, showing her how to prune, water, and protect the young plants from pests and harsh sun. Though their work was physically demanding, it carried a quiet reward, a sense that they were creating life and hope from the earth itself. The girl felt a sense of pride she had never known in her tribe. There, she had been judged harshly and cast aside, yet here she was, creating something tangible with her own hands. She began to understand that redemption was not given. It was earned through effort, patience, and persistence. The plants that flourished under her care became symbols of her own growth. Just as she tended to the crops, she nurtured her own spirit, cultivating resilience, patience, and confidence. Each day was a reminder that life could be rebuilt, even after loss and rejection. Her bond with the farmer deepened as well. They did not speak of feelings in a dramatic way, yet their mutual trust and understanding grew steadily. The farmer began to rely on her instincts, consulting her when difficult decisions arose, whether about the health of the animals or the timing of planting. In turn, the girl began to trust his judgment, recognizing the wisdom that came from experience. Their partnership became seamless, marked by quiet cooperation and shared responsibility. It was in this gentle rhythm of work and understanding that she found both security and belonging. One afternoon, a strong wind swept across the farm, threatening to damage the young crops. The girl and the farmer rushed into the fields, tying plants to stakes and shielding them as best as they could. The effort was exhausting, and the wind tore at their clothes and hair, yet they worked side by side without complaint. As they finished, drenched in sweat and dust, the girl realized that she was no longer afraid of hard work or adversity. She had faced far greater challenges alone in the desert, and this seemed manageable in comparison. This realization brought her a deep sense of empowerment and pride, confirming that she had grown stronger both physically and emotionally. Evenings were times of quiet reflection. The girl often sat by the stream, watching the water move over rocks and pebbles, listening to the rustle of leaves and the calls of distant animals. The farmer sometimes joined her, and they would share simple stories about their days. These moments were filled with calm, understanding, and unspoken companionship. She began to feel that she had found a place where she could heal fully, where her past did not define her, and where her efforts were valued. The farm had become a sanctuary, a place where she could find peace and purpose in a world that had once seemed cruel and unforgiving. Her confidence and skills continued to grow. She learned to tend to sick animals, treat minor injuries, and anticipate their needs before they became urgent problems. She also began to experiment with planting new crops, testing her understanding of the land, and learning through observation and trial. Each success reinforced her belief in her own abilities, and each failure taught her patience, humility, and the importance of perseverance. She realized that growth, both personal and practical, required effort, attention, and resilience. The girl had once felt powerless, but now she understood that she had the ability to shape her life, even in difficult circumstances. One day, as she repaired a fence damaged by the spring rains, the Apache girl paused to look over the farm. She noticed how much she had learned in a short time, the way she could read the land, understand the animals, and manage her responsibilities without constant guidance. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had earned her place on the farm through diligence and effort. This realization brought her a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. She no longer needed the approval of her tribe to feel worthy. She was learning to define her own value through her actions and choices. The farmer noticed these changes in her as well. He admired her growing independence, her careful observation of the land, and her steady approach to challenges. He began to treat her not just as someone he guided, but as a partner in the life they were building together. He shared more of his knowledge with her, teaching her advanced techniques in farming, animal care, and household management. Each lesson was accompanied by patience and encouragement, reinforcing the girl's sense of competence and belonging. She began to realize that life could be both demanding and fulfilling, and that guidance from a trusted person could help her achieve more than she ever thought possible. Despite the steady growth and calm of farm life, the girl occasionally faced moments of doubt. Memories of her tribe, of the humiliation and rejection she had endured, would surface unexpectedly. She sometimes wondered if she would ever be fully free of the pain that had driven her into the desert. Yet she had learned to face these thoughts without letting them dominate her. She reminded herself of the skills she had acquired, the strength she had developed, and the trust she had earned. She realized that healing was not a linear process, but a journey with ups and downs, and that her perseverance was a testament to her resilience. One evening, a neighboring farmer stopped by to trade goods. He remarked on the girl's skill in tending the animals and crops, praising her careful work. Though she initially felt shy and unworthy of praise, the farmer beside her smiled quietly, signaling his agreement with the kind words. The girl realized that she was beginning to gain recognition not through force or seeking approval, but through consistent effort and competence. She understood that her past shame could not overshadow the respect she had earned in the present. This recognition, small as it was, became a quiet affirmation of her redemption and growth. The girl also began to notice changes within herself on a deeper level. She felt a growing sense of inner peace, a calm acceptance of life as it came. She no longer reacted impulsively to challenges or criticism. Instead, she observed, considered, and acted with thoughtfulness. Her mind had grown sharper, her heart steadier, and her spirit more resilient. The desert had taught her endurance, but the farm taught her wisdom, patience, and the value of nurturing life, both in the land and in herself. As summer approached, the Apache girl found herself increasingly involved in the life of the farm. She helped plan planting schedules, managed the care of the animals, and ensured the household ran smoothly. Her days were full of purposeful work, and her nights were filled with quiet reflection and satisfaction. She felt that she was contributing to something larger than herself, and that her life had meaning beyond survival. Each day was a step toward rebuilding her identity, forging a new life, and finding the peace she had sought since leaving her tribe. The bond with the farmer also deepened in subtle ways. He began to rely on her judgment more, asking her opinion on matters he once handled alone. She noticed that he trusted her not just with tasks, but with decisions and responsibility. In turn, she felt a growing respect and care for him, recognizing his quiet strength, patience, and unwavering support. Their relationship was built not on words alone, but on shared experience, trust, and the mutual understanding that they could rely on each other. This companionship, steady and genuine, became one of the most comforting aspects of her new life. One particularly quiet evening, as the girl sat watching the sunset, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the humiliation and exile she had faced in her tribe, the loneliness of the desert, and the struggle to survive on her own. She realized that each challenge had prepared her for this moment, the moment where she could embrace life fully, with confidence, skill, and hope. She understood that redemption was not a destination, but a process, a gradual reclaiming of dignity, purpose, and self-respect. By the end of this period, the Apache girl had transformed in profound ways. She was no longer a frightened, ostracized child wandering alone in the desert. She was a capable, thoughtful young woman who had learned to care for herself, the land, and those around her. She had discovered the value of trust, patience, and consistent effort. Most importantly, she had begun to find peace within herself, realizing that her past could not define her present or her future. The farm had become more than a place to live. It had become a place of healing, growth, and quiet redemption. The girl understood that the future still held challenges, but she also knew that she was ready to face them. She had learned the power of resilience, the importance of trust, and the quiet strength that comes from caring for others. The farmer had shown her that life could be rebuilt with patience, effort, and understanding. And she had discovered within herself the courage to embrace that new life fully. In the soft glow of the evening, surrounded by the fruits of her labor and the quiet companionship of someone who believed in her, she realized that redemption was not just a dream. It was her lived reality, growing steadily with each passing day. The Apache girl awoke to the soft light of morning spilling over the farm. The air was cool and filled with the scent of earth and grass, a reminder that life continued to grow and change around her. She stretched, feeling the strength in her muscles, the steadiness of her hands, and the resilience in her spirit. The journey that had begun with humiliation and loneliness had brought her here, to a life of purpose, growth, and quiet joy. She felt a sense of peace she had never known in her tribe or during her time in the desert. Her days were full and meaningful. She tended the crops, cared for the animals, and managed household tasks with skill and confidence. The farm had become a place where she could shape her life, where each effort mattered, and where her abilities were recognized and valued. She no longer felt like a victim of circumstance. Instead, she felt like an active participant in her own story, capable of making choices, solving problems, and creating beauty in the world around her. The bond between her and the farmer had grown into something deep and steady. Though neither spoke of it directly, there was a mutual understanding and care that had developed over months of shared work and quiet companionship. They looked out for one another, anticipated each other's needs, and found comfort in the presence of someone who understood and respected them. The Apache girl had come to see the farmer not just as a guide or mentor, but as a companion whose quiet wisdom and patience had helped her rebuild her life. One morning, as they worked together in the fields, the girl noticed how naturally their movements aligned. She handed him tools before he asked, adjusted the watering of plants based on what she knew he would need, and anticipated which tasks would come next. The farmer, in turn, trusted her judgment completely, allowing her to take initiative in ways he had not with anyone before. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and the recognition of each other's strengths. In these moments, she realized that she had found a connection deeper than friendship, one built on trust, care, and shared purpose. The Apache girl also began to see her life as a story of redemption. She had been cast out by her tribe, humiliated and left to survive alone in the harsh desert. But each challenge she had faced, each day of thirst, hunger, and uncertainty, had strengthened her. She had learned to rely on herself, to understand the land, and to cultivate skills that gave her independence and confidence. Now, on the farm, she had transformed that survival into a life of dignity, meaning, and joy. Redemption, she realized, was not about erasing the past. It was about embracing it, learning from it, and creating a better future. The seasons continued to pass, each bringing new challenges and rewards. Summer heat tested their crops and animals, yet the girls' careful attention ensured that everything thrived. In autumn, the harvest became a celebration of the work they had done together. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment as she gathered the fruits of their labor, knowing that each successful crop was a reflection of her skill, patience, and resilience. The act of nurturing life and seeing it flourish gave her a sense of pride and joy she had never experienced before. Her confidence and self-respect grew with each passing day. She no longer feared making decisions or taking responsibility. She could handle emergencies, manage tasks independently, and care for the animals and crops with competence. The girl had become a capable, strong, and thoughtful young woman, whose presence on the farm was essential and valued. The lessons of the desert, resilience, patience, and courage, combined with the guidance of the farmer, had prepared her to fully embrace this new life. The farmer, too, had changed in subtle ways. He had once been a solitary figure, content with his routines and independence. Yet the Apache girl's presence brought warmth, companionship, and a renewed sense of purpose. He found joy in mentoring her, pride in her growth, and comfort in the quiet understanding they shared. Their lives had intertwined in ways neither had expected, creating a partnership rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. The bond they had formed was a source of strength, offering both of them stability, understanding, and companionship. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky glowed with shades of orange and pink, the Apache girl and the farmer sat outside the farmhouse. The air was filled with the earthy scent of the harvested fields, and the soft rustling of leaves added a gentle soundtrack to the evening. They did not speak much, but their shared presence was enough. The girl reflected on her journey, from the humiliation and exile imposed by her tribe, to the struggles of the desert, to the life she had built on the farm. She realized that every step had led her to this moment of peace, strength, and belonging. She thought about her tribe, about the pain of rejection, and the loneliness she had endured. Yet those memories no longer held the power to hurt her as they once had. She had faced far greater challenges alone, learned essential skills, and cultivated a life that gave her dignity and purpose. The farmer's steady guidance and unwavering kindness had shown her that people could offer support without judgment, and that redemption could be found through hard work, patience, and self-respect. She felt gratitude, not just for him, but for the journey itself, which had taught her resilience, independence, and the value of compassion. The Apache girl also recognized the importance of hope. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, there was the possibility of new beginnings. The desert, once a place of punishment and isolation, had taught her endurance and self-reliance. The farm, in turn, had taught her trust, care, and the quiet joy of creating life and nurturing it. Together, these experiences had transformed her, giving her the wisdom, courage, and confidence to embrace her future fully. She understood that hope was not a fleeting feeling, but a steady force that guided her actions, decisions, and relationships. One day, as they prepared for the winter, the girl worked to organize the farm, storing crops, reinforcing fences, and ensuring the animals had enough food. The farmer observed her, a quiet pride in his eyes. He could see how far she had come, from a frightened, ostracized girl wandering the desert to a strong, capable, and self-assured young woman. He trusted her completely, relied on her judgment, and valued her presence more than he could express. Their lives had merged in a partnership built on respect, care, and shared effort, creating a bond deeper than words could convey. The Apache girl, too, felt a deep connection to the farmer and the life they had built together. She had discovered a sense of belonging, trust, and security she had never known before. Her past, though painful, had shaped her into someone resilient and thoughtful. She realized that she did not need the approval of her tribe to feel worthy. She had earned her place in the world through her own efforts, courage, and integrity. She had found redemption not in the eyes of others but within herself and in the companionship of someone who believed in her. As winter approached, the farm settled into a quiet rhythm. Snow dusted the hills and trees, and the air was crisp and clean. The Apache girl continued to manage the daily tasks, tending to animals and maintaining the home, while also reflecting on her journey and the lessons she had learned. She understood that life was not about perfection, but about growth, resilience, and the capacity to care for oneself and others. She had learned to trust, to persevere, and to find joy in simple, meaningful work. One evening, after a long day of preparation for the cold months ahead, the girl and the farmer sat by the fire inside the farmhouse. The flames flickered warmly, casting soft light across the room. They shared a quiet meal, speaking of small matters, the animals, the weather, and plans for the next day. There was no need for dramatic words. Their companionship, built on months of shared effort and understanding, spoke volumes. The girl felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that she had found a life where she was valued, respected, and safe. The Apache girl realized that her journey of redemption was complete, not because her past was forgotten, but because she had transformed it into a source of strength. She had learned to rely on herself, to trust others, and to embrace life fully. She had found a place where she belonged, skills that empowered her, and a companion who supported and cared for her. Her heart, once heavy with shame and loneliness, now carried warmth, confidence, and hope. She understood that true redemption comes from resilience, growth, and the courage to embrace a new life. The farmer, too, felt the profound changes in their shared life. He had witnessed her transformation, marveled at her resilience, and found comfort in her presence. Together they had built a life of quiet fulfillment, rooted in mutual respect, shared effort, and genuine companionship. The bond between them was steady, warm, and enduring, a testament to the power of kindness, patience, and trust. Their lives had intertwined in a way that neither had expected, creating a new family and a sense of home. In the quiet of a winter evening, as snow fell softly outside, the Apache girl looked at the farmer and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had been stripped of her identity by her tribe, left to survive alone, and faced immense challenges in the desert. Yet through perseverance, skill, and the kindness of another, she had rebuilt her life. She had discovered her strength, found trust and companionship, and embraced a life of dignity, purpose, and quiet joy. Her redemption was not a single moment. It was the sum of every choice, every effort, and every lesson learned along the way. As the fire crackled and the night settled over the farm, the Apache girl felt a sense of completion and hope. She had transformed her pain into strength, her isolation into belonging, and her past humiliation into a life filled with respect, skill, and care. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she now had the resilience, wisdom, and companionship to face them. In the warmth of the farmhouse, surrounded by the fruits of her labor and the trust of someone who had believed in her, she knew she had found her true home. The story of the Apache girl concluded not with grand triumphs or dramatic events, but with the quiet, steady assurance of a life reclaimed. She had faced the worst of despair, learned the value of patience, perseverance, and trust, and discovered that redemption is not given. It is earned through courage, growth, and meaningful connections. The farm had become her sanctuary, the farmer her companion, and her own strength the foundation upon which she built a new, hopeful, and fulfilling life.